Hello all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from QuEST Global. Happy Women's Day to all. International Women's Day has been observed since the early 1900s. It was a time that saw the growth and rise of radical ideology. It was when women's oppression and inequality was urging women to become more vocal and active in campaigning for change. The first campaign was on demanding shorter hours at work, better pay, and voting rights to women. Today, after a century, things have changed. Women are now leading many countries, have gone to outer space, have been to wars, shining in sports, making their mark in any and every industry. From the question, women can't do this, to is there anything women can't do? We have come a long way. And men, thank you. Thank you for being our allies in this journey. Your support, willingness to change, and challenging the year-old system, being vocal about them has helped us a lot in this journey. While we celebrate women today, let us also give a round of applause to all the men who stand beside us and fight along with us. For every she, there is a he, and he, along with she, is throwing huge rocks through the glass ceiling. Today, we are celebrating the success of women. Let us take a moment and choose to challenge the stereotypes that come with one gender. Let us challenge to change. Let us inspire one another with our stories. Without any delay, let me welcome our guest, Dr. Claudia Süssmuth Dyckerhoff, Board Member, QuEST Global, and our host, Dr. Ajay Prabhu, President Technology Services, QuEST Global. Ajay, in this fireside chat, will interact with Claudia, who will share her experience with us. Before that, a small introduction about Ajay. Ajay has always been a champion for educating women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, commonly known as STEM. Ajay has initiated many programs that enabled underprivileged children afford quality education and make the right choice for a bright future. Even in his personal life, in the US, he delayed his PhD for a year, supported his wife while she was completing her master's. It is our pleasure to have Ajay here talk to Claudia. Ajay, I welcome to this session and hand over the stage to you. Before I leave, let me remind you all that you can share your questions to host and guest through QuEST intranet. You can use the comment section or send in your questions through Ask Claudia. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day ahead. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you, Sana, for a nice introduction, setting the context for why we are here today. I am extremely pleased to have Claudia here. She is joining us from Hong Kong, and I had to double check where she was because she is all over the place. Even during the last 1 year, while the world was at standstill, she was shuttling between different countries, trying to take care of her family one, on other side, take care of all her professional responsibilities. So it's my pleasure to have Dr. Claudia Süssmuth Dyckerhoff. And she has a very illustrious past, and I'd be very happy to go through that. And she is perfect delegate to be sharing her views on this Women's Day. So she was born in Germany and did her early education in Germany. And then she joined the bank, Deutsche Bank, for a couple of years, where she did her early internship training in both Germany as well as in Tokyo, Japan. And that's when her travels all around the world starts. And then she did her master's in business administration from University of Galan in insurance and risk. Then she did her master's from ISADE in Barcelona, and on to PhD in entrepreneurship from University of St. Gallen again, during which she also did a 1-year stint at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor as a visiting scholar. Then in 1995, she joined McKinsey, where she served for 22 years in various roles in different parts of the world, starting with New Jersey, USA, then Switzerland, and spent a lot of time in China as a senior partner, and then later becoming the sector leader of the healthcare division of McKinsey. In 2016 onwards, she joined several boards and she has been an active member of many boards, including F. Hoffman LaRoche of Basel, Clariant. Even in McKinsey, she continues to be an external senior advisor. She is become a specialist in a healthcare division, and she is on the advisory board of the University of St. Gallen. She is on the board of Circadia and even on the board of EduGreen Education and Services based in Kolkata. And we are very, very pleased to have her on our board of QueST Global. And she is championing various strategic advisory to the board of QueST, as well as helping us on the diversity agenda. So it is great to have her here. She is a mother of 5 people. She is an avid lover of mountains. So anytime she finds a mountain, and we can see in the background as well, the mountain she loves. She is hiking, biking, snowboarding, skiing. She is a polyglot, knows many languages. She speaks German, English, Mandarin, as well as Spanish. So it is great to have you here, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Very happy.
So like Sahana said, today we are celebrating International Women's Day. It's actually a celebration, isn't it, about many of the victories that have been achieved, and it's actually the 110th Women's International Women's Day today. The first one happened in 1911. So much has been accomplished, but there is still a lot of distance to go in terms of bringing diversity. So maybe we'll start talking a little bit. At any time. We have some questions coming in. At some point, I'll start taking those as well. So maybe let's start with, as a woman in business, you have achieved a lot. And so I was just curious about how your early days as a child in your family was, if you would share that. Who inspired you to excel in your career? I mean, women have a choice. Everybody has a choice, and you could have made certain choices, and you could have gone into being just a home caretaker. But you really pursued a career, and you have done so well, and you have also found a great family of 5 children, which is not a small family. So, I mean, you are such a role model. So I'd really like to learn a little bit about your childhood, how it was, how you got inspired to do all the things that you did.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay. I'm happy to comment on that. So first of all, I have to say, I'm a single child, which might have been my motivation for having a larger family. But my parents, and that was actually something more unusual in Germany, in the generation of my parents, they were always both working. And my parents used to be both professors. My father was a professor in modern history. My mother was a professor in education. And so I think this already was a pretty unusual setup, which honestly, as a child, I didn't really appreciate. For me, there was never another reality. But in hindsight, I realized that, for my mother in particular, to be a professor in her generation has been an amazing achievement, even more so because her family didn't have any academic roots. And in Germany, it was unfortunately very much a system of, if you had some roots in the system, if you had some connections, the likelihood of you becoming a professor was much higher. And she was not. I guess the other aspect of my childhood was that because my parents were both working, my grandparents played a pretty big role, in particular my grandmother. And so if you ask me about my role models, and I will comment on the term role models, but I would say it's clearly the combination of my grandmother and my father. My mother as well, but I guess the pecking order in my case is pretty much my grandmother, my father, and then my mother. because my grandmother stepped in quite significantly whenever my parents had to travel. They also did quite some international research at that time. So she was the one, who was always ready to take me on. She kind of taught me a lot of lessons about nature, caring about really kind of from plants to animals, then family. She was really our anchor in the family. But she was clearly not the super intellectual person. She was the caring person who always had time for the important things, who always put herself last. So that is clearly a very shaping memory of hers. And then I say, my father, because as a role model, because in that generation again, but that kind of is a theme through my whole, childhood, but then also adolescence. He was our anchor in our small family. He was amazingly supportive of my mother. There was never a discussion about, is it him making a career or her making a career? They always did it together. They were always supporting, quite symbiotic, I would say. And then the interesting twist in my mother's career is that she later on, actually in 1986, became a politician, and not just a politician, but she entered as a cross-entry into the German system as a minister for education, family, and later on health. And that was, again, I will be honest, at that point, I was always in preference of having her as my aunt, because I thought the sacrifices you have to go through as a family when out of a sudden one of your parents becomes a, kind of very high level politician, the sacrifices are very high. On the other hand, it has been a major achievement. And again, it was my father who absolutely supported my mother without ever giving up his own career. And so if I have to summarize my whole, early childhood, up to 20, it was clearly my grandmother and then my father making it all possible. Because in all fairness, as intelligent and as capable as my mother is, without his backing, it would not have happened. And I think I had the very, very high privilege to see my parents in a real partnership and never in a traditional model, which again, as a child, I didn't really make much of that. But in hindsight, I think it shaped me, because for me, frankly, there was never a different model. And only when you then compare it to other friends and their family setup, I appreciated, that my experience, which I often felt was quite hard, my mother being a politician, hardly ever at home, my father then very much stepping in and being my sparring partner. It was clearly not the usual family setup. I would clearly have preferred to have more time with my parents, but then there was this kind of big responsibility of my mother for society. Then you put that all together, and in hindsight, you realize that this also allowed me to be a quite free spirit. I never had any constraint in my thinking that, would I ever be able to do what I want to do? Because this pattern of, if I have a partner in my life, do I need to sacrifice, or do I need to step aside, or do I need to be more supporting than thinking of potentially my interests? It never really occurred to me, which is, I think, a big privilege.
Okay, so that's a very interesting family background you have. So, and it's something that not necessarily a lot of people have, whether it's men or women growing up. So, so that's great. Obviously, this begs one question: how come you didn't become a politician?
It's a good question. I'm very interested in politics. I really expect people to be engaged in politics, because I think this is our societal responsibility. We cannot complain about a system, a government, if we don't contribute. But at least at this stage, me being outside of the country where I can really vote, makes it quite hard to be politically engaged. So at this point, It's really in reach. It might change, frankly, when I am, potentially in Switzerland. But I'm also, again, honest here, right? If you have experienced what it takes to be a politician at that high, entry stage, the burden it puts on your family is significant. And I'm not really sure I want to do any of that as long as my kids are young. And I have still a 7-year-old girl. And I think also for any other responsibility, you need to really think carefully about where do you as an individual think you can have more impact.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I would be a good politician. So, I'm not saying no at all, but I'm not sure it's the best path for me.
Okay. All right. You know that you are on the social media, right?
Yes. I would say the same to whoever kind of wants to ask me about it.
Okay, great. So, so since we are talking about politics and all, like on this International Women's Day, as governments, what is still to be done for bringing more of the parity among women and men? Especially for you, you have lived in multiple cultures on your work. You have experienced, whether in the US or Europe or China and other places, right? So you have been to multiple places. So there might be different cultural aspects to it. There could be aspects related to the economy of the countries, or the time during which they have had independence from whatever their past. So do you feel that there are some standards? Is there a time when the whole world can migrate to a standard of parity between men and women, especially? So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a very complex question. I would clearly want that, and I have on the one hand some kind of clear hopes that we get there. I guess I'm also realistic that this will still take effort, a lot of effort. But obviously, in some Western countries, we are already in a much better position than in other countries. And so once I have answered your question, I guess the next discussion point is, how can we contribute and how can we get there? I guess it wouldn't be even something just as a vision, but really something that should be achievable, that we don't need to talk about the gender parity anymore, right? Because at least in some Western countries now, I think people have understood that women are equally capable. The whole discussion that we used to have about are women equally skilled, educated? Of course, if the system doesn't allow them to have a proper education, then we cannot expect them to be equally qualified. But in systems where we now have equal education, then the next part is, do they get the same opportunities in their professions? Do they get the same support in terms of having a family, in terms of, family, child support? And, when it comes then to taking care of their older parents, is there a support model? Because what I've done quite some research into the whole support for women across Asia, and you can see that it's not only about the mothers that potentially have, their children. Even without having children, taking care of the parents who get older is yet another task. And somehow, sadly, it is assumed that this is kind of the role of the women to fill in. And you would wonder, why isn't that a mutually shared responsibility? Kind of, the giving back, we have all received from parents, so why wouldn't we mutually be accountable for giving back? So in that sense, if you ask me, I think there's still, as a first step, I always strongly believe that education, skilling, experience is a fundamental part of it, because only then can we say they are equally qualified, and we can stop all these arguments about, yes, that man would be better qualified. And then it's a lot about the enabling factors and allowing women to really be free spirits, in the sense of, they could make it happen. I would also say, I think it's very important that we don't stereotype and say every woman now needs to be a career woman. By the way, whatever we define as career, I could have a very fulfilling career simply taking care of all the older people in my neighborhood, and that could be very fulfilling. My point here is I wouldn't want to create more pressure on women that they have to perform, but I would really want them to have the opportunities. And that at this point still is not given. And as long as that is not given, I would continue to work towards, what are the models that help them with childcare, with elderly care, any family member who is sick, how can we help each other? And I think, unfortunately, COVID has shown that in some of the Western countries, the women again made a few steps backwards, because out of a sudden it was back to them to combine not only their job working from home, but also supporting their children. And I'm not saying that these were always the women. I'm sure there are a lot of fathers around the globe who kind of stepped in and did the same. I would just say that the more women there were, it didn't necessarily help this whole dynamic where we made a lot of progress towards parity and feeling, that we can all do the same no matter which gender.
Yeah, I think you bring a great point about how in multiple cultures, it is by default, everybody thinks women are the caregivers. And that's also a big reason for many of the disparities that are out there. For example, if you talk about why women don't make it to the top of their careers, not as many women make it to the top of their careers versus their peers who are men. So this whole caregiving, raising children becomes a part of something that actually puts women a little bit behind. I mean, that's so, but you are a counterexample because you have 5 children, and yet you have really worked on your career and reached this height in your career. So how did you manage that? How were you able to manage? You were a lone child in your family with your parents, and now you have 5 children, you and your husband. So how did you manage? How was it different from how you were raised? And what were all the dynamics and struggles for you to balance both the family as well as your work?
I will start with a very important statement that is, it might now all look like super planned, almost like on a playbook, but it really wasn't. So I think there were a few things that mattered to me. And I guess I would give that as an advice to any women around the globe. The first important factor and the determinant of my development was, with whom do I live together, which is my husband. I think if I had not found him, and frankly, I guess we all realize, you are together with someone, you don't all know the facets of how people are developing, including yourself. But we have pretty much lived what my parents kind of have lived, which was and is for us now a complete partnership. We don't have any discussion about, do we now sacrifice my career because of your career? Do we do this step and then I have to step back and you do this or that? We kind of naturally found, how we divide our work at home. So for instance, my husband would be always taking care more of the admin and maybe kind of thinking through travel itineraries, which, with 5 children being partially in different parts of the world, can be quite demanding. And I, for instance, take more care of academics in school because I love it. And the rest, quite frankly, we have always supported each other in career moves. And the discussion of saying no to something has never been a discussion of, oh, I don't do it because of you. It has been a discussion of, we don't do it because we don't think this is the right, part of, spending time, not the right purpose of a company or whatever. And this is for me the most important factor, right? I can only do what I'm doing now, and I can only enjoy it the way I do it because I found the right partner, and we live a true partnership. And if I'm traveling around the world for business meetings, I know that at home, it's not stopping. My husband can step in anytime, and if he's traveling business-wise, I do the same. So this is a big factor, and that has naturally evolved, but in a way quite consciously, and without that it wouldn't have happened. The other factor might be that I couldn't plan it like this. I knew ideally, if I could have wished for it, I wanted more than one child, simply because of my background and experience. Did I plan for 5? No, but I can also say every single child was a very wanted child, and we had another key principle, which was, yes, we can have very successful careers. We always want to make sure there is enough purpose for us behind it, but family has first priority. In other words, if anything of our setup had not worked for the children, if we had realized that one of the children would have been suffering, or my husband would have suffered, or vice versa, we would have changed. And we take time to reflect on where we are, and we take time out, and that happens in the mountains, where we say, is this where we want to be, and are we okay with this, and do we think this is fulfillment? Any course correction? So quite conscious, not over analyzing, not like a spreadsheet, but I guess reflective, which is, again, I think one of those insights over time, right? You need to find the time for the reflection, and you need to make sure you're not just running around in the wheel, not kind of hearing the signals, not listening to your own body and soul. So it has to be quite reflective, despite all the craziness of schedules and having tons of commitments. That is a very conscious move, I think.
Fantastic. So you are saying that partnership with your husband is an important aspect of making sure both of you are progressing simultaneously. So maybe you have been a mentor to other women who are aspiring. If you were to comment on, let's say, some women who are very aspiring but have been, let's say, stuck in a traditional expectations of society and kind of struggling with that. Would you have some advice for how they can balance the work and life, and what it is that they could do to help themselves and their families at the same time and have a fulfilling life?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's, whatever I define as my happiness is not their happiness, right? So I guess over time, and maybe I started more radical when I do a lot of women, development programs, or women reach out, and I love helping if I can. But I'm humble. I'm not assuming that, maybe they are not really stuck. Maybe some of them prefer where they are. And if they're really happy in where they are, that is perfectly fine, as long as they then are really happy. And what I don't tolerate for too long is, if people are complaining and venting and don't change anything. So either you are happy with where you are, and then that's perfect. If you are in a situation where you are not happy and you complain, then I would argue, okay, so then let's look at it and say, what can you change? And I understand your question is more towards that, Ajay. As I said, I think, with whom you live in a partnership is important. It is also important to define for yourself, and in that partnership, what is the purpose and what kind of is your passion and what drives you. Because what other people might think you ought to do or ought not to do is most likely not very helpful. So as a young person, that might sound abstract, and we ask for advice and then we get 10 different directions. But I guess everyone has a good inner compass, and you can sense, when are you on the right track or not. There's another part, which is, you need to have tolerance for failure, and you cannot be liked by everybody. that was very hard for me to learn. In McKinsey, I was the first woman in our office who went on a part-time program when our first son was born, and I was a project manager at that time. And first of all, people couldn't quite deal with me being on part-time, and I frankly couldn't deal with me being on part-time, because it was very hard for me to accept that out of a sudden I didn't have 100%, but just 80%, and I tried to keep one day free to have more time with our son. But then I needed to say no to things, and that was so hard. Everybody had great ideas for additional opportunities and things that could be exciting, but I myself had to learn to say no to things and to live with the consequences, because out of a sudden I couldn't be in the center of everything. I had to live with some trade-offs. And so that is a journey, and I guess depending on where you are in your career, these trade-offs differ, but early on it is helpful to learn you need to say no to things, and you need to learn to not be loved, or, well, love is maybe different, but not everybody can just agree to your point of view, and that is also important to learn, and that you then focus on a few things and do those really well, and find also pleasure and enjoyment in those, without always thinking, oh, if I could have done this and that and other things. This transition towards focusing on the things that then work and can be done. And maybe another aspect to your question, what would I give as advice to those women that feel they are stuck and they want to change it? It is helpful to have a vision, where they want to be in 2-3 years, maybe not much longer, maybe that might not be realistic. And to really think about what does it take to get from here to there. Who are their mentors? Because often we are not so good in seeking, mentors, really just mentors, not just talking about my next career step, but mentors who join you through your journey, and who are honest with you, and who will also tell you where they think you should not go and what you ideally, push harder versus less. So there are a few of those things that will help, and then it is really about having some kind of perspectives of where to go and also pursuing it, but living with the fact that it will not just be a straightforward line. It will be a bit bumpy. At least my journey was quite bumpy.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I think that's very helpful. So maybe it's time for me to pick up one of the questions that has come from the audience. And it's kind of a segue to what you just addressed. And especially with the last 1 year of COVID time, with people having to stay home, and in the past, people would go to work, and that life was kind of nicely compartmentalized between work and life. So naturally, what is your preference, or what is your advice? Do you like to have a separation between work and life very strictly, or do you tend to blend it? You are always working, you are always living. What is your preference?
I think for sure I'm always living. Let's put it this way. I think we were all forced for work from home. In my case, there was clearly one big plus. I had less travel. Pre-COVID, I was traveling a lot, and I enjoy it. I'm also honest on that front. But for my family life, obviously me being less on a plane and working more from home was already a big plus. Even working from home, I really tried hard to have my own, if I can say, zone. I shared with you, I did a lot of quarantines, sometimes with my family, so I didn't always have my private room. Ideally, I have a private room, but I had many situations where I didn't have a private room. And then I tried to create my own zone, by using headsets and kind of, creating a little bit of a border for myself, because I don't like to be always in the flow of everything around me. I need my real focus time to read, to digest, to think. But am quite good, I think, in saying, okay, now I have had my 3 hours. Now I can also switch, for 1 hour towards, family support, work from home, and this whole online schooling were kind of areas where I really had to find a good balance for my children. And the other part for me, no matter where we were, was sports, because I need sports as a balance.
Okay.
But to the work and life, I try to have carve out times and not to blend everything. As much as I love work and I work a lot, but also like weekends, I really try hard that weekends are family time. And only, I rather work late till Friday night and I pick it up Sunday evening. But with children, I make a real effort that the Saturday and Sunday is family time. And dinners, for instance, meals,
Okay.
My phone is away. And I really try to separate that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So earlier we were talking about having how important it is to have a supporting life partner. Maybe let's talk about a work situation. And one of the common things that women seek advice about is an unsupportive manager, boss, or somebody very annoying in their team who's not making it difficult for them, or the joy of work goes away because of such situation. I don't know if you have had to deal with such situations, and what's your advice for women who need to face such things?
My biggest advice here is to find allies. And it might not change immediately that situation, but I guess if you are in exchange with other people, and it's not necessarily gender specific, could be other women, but could also be other men, and you can share your situations with them, and just talk about it, B, maybe get some advice, because some of the annoying part might be triggered by you unconsciously, or you let it far too close to your heart, and it doesn't really need to get that close to your heart. So there might be some techniques to get a bit more distance. But at least in my case, I wasn't able to do that just by talking about it to myself. I needed the exchange with others outside of that situation or in that situation, because there might be other people suffering from that same dynamic. And that gave me already some inner, maybe I can call it inner strength. And it helped me to, put that specific dynamic into the context, and frankly, to move it a bit away from what I was trying to do, so that it was less disturbing. And I guess we all can have those mechanisms. If you, realize what the situation really is, and if you put it almost in a box and move that box a bit out of your mindset, it helps, because then it cannot be so obsessing in your work, and you just move it out of your focus and then get more energy by doing other things. It doesn't mean the thing is, the bad dynamic is going away, but then you don't give it too much attention and too much weight, so that it drains your own energy level and potentially output of your own work.
Thank you. So another question, just because earlier you talked about mentors, just popped here. Who prefer have best of your mentors? Were they men or women? How should one go about finding a good mentor?
I have both, and it differed by stage of my career. My first years, my whole environment was so dominated by men that I had only male mentors. Over time, I got to know more women in positions where I thought they could be good mentors. I wouldn't claim that I'm the best in reaching out to mentors, but in critical situations, I think I knew who to go to and with whom to reflect on my situation. And, you know, the interesting, if I reflect on it, it was not emergency ad hoc. I think I had always a bit of time to reflect on it with those mentors. I tried to find mentors outside of my direct work, because over time, at least for me, you know, they gave me additional perspectives, and they were also able to kind of, you know, put a different lens to what I was going through. And my other experience was, you know, these mentors, you know, I always thought, oh my God, I'm bothering them, I'm stealing their time. And reality was, I think I can, you know, think of these different mentors. They seem to enjoy it too. So it was not, maybe that helps us, you know, when you reach out, potentially we all wait too long till we reach out, and we think we can't, you know, take time away from them. But I have had always positive experiences, and it's basically an encouragement to rather go out early than not, right?
Yeah, yeah, great. So we talked about family, we talked about immediate supervisor. Let's talk a little bit about the organization, you know, what the organization needs to do. Reality today is, if you look at the number of CEOs of all the companies, majority of them are male. There is a maybe slowly increasing number of women in top positions, and even in the boards, right? Typical board is constituted with many members, and a minority is women right now. So what is the organization's role? What should each of the organization do to bring more parity? And how long it might take? How urgent is it? And what is there in it for the corporation, for the organization itself? Why should it be done? Because I think there are some good reasons why it's important to bring diversity.
Yeah, great set of questions. You realize, Ajay, you asked at least 3 in 1, right? So let me start from the back. As a company, you know, there has been a lot of research by now. I guess we all are interested in, you know, what does diversity really mean? So I'm going way beyond the gender, and it's not just a strong belief of mine, but it's supported by research that companies that have real diversity, and we should talk about what does that mean in percentages, because it needs a certain critical mass, that you will get to better results. There has been some interesting research on Women Matter, you know, as part of McKinsey, where they looked at the performance of, sadly, they could only do that with stock listed companies, but by looking at, you know, female board representation, female executive team representation, and going all the levels through. And, you know, the ones with a higher gender mix had a better performance. And so why is that? And that's where I want to link it to the overall theme of diversity. If you have more people who think diversely, you will have better problem solving. You will have better approaches. You know, you will reflect on the same situation with different lenses and backgrounds. And it's actually not so hard to understand that you will get to better results. And now I link that again to my previous statement. Now that women are equally educated, there is no person on earth who can convince me that, you know, there are not enough women to tap into as a talent pool. The talent pool is huge, and I think it's more a matter of A, how do you identify these women? B, how do you make sure these women know about your company? And then when you attract them, how do you keep them? Okay, so that I think, you know, there is tons of benefit for corporation. And I could push this further to say, if corporates don't tap into that female pool, and then we go further for diversity, they will lose out. And you know, research has already shown, you know, that this could be a real negative. So that's the benefit, I think, is obvious. Now, there is also more research about the critical mass it takes. And frankly, having just one woman in an executive team role or on a board is not enough. You need a critical mass, which typically is at 25%. And I'm not going into the whole, topic of quota, but I believe that for diversity to really have its own dynamic, you need a critical mass, because otherwise, the other kind of powers in the room, powers at the working place can take over, and then you kind of kill any diversity, even though you have good intents. So as a company, I think the target needs to be clear in terms of diversity, where one wants to be. It needs to be in real metrics. I'm a strong believer of what you measure is what you get, and if you don't measure, it will not really happen. And then to get there, it is a mix of, yes, what are the other enablers for women, or, by the way, for male partners who are supporting women. So we might also need to look into that. What are also some, programs for, be it mothers who are returning, how to get them quickly on board. So there is a multitude of enablers that can be pulled, but it needs to be a coherent approach. And the first important factor is the word from the top. That is also demonstrated by research. The leadership team has to be absolutely convinced that they want diversity and that they are doing enabling matters, and that they are open to changes, be it in supporting models, to make that happen. If only one person in the leadership team is convinced about it, it will not happen. You need really the tone from the top and the action from the top. And then it is a journey, no matter what. There might also be some frustrations, by male that are very supportive of women, and then women decide to not take that job. We also have to live through that, because people have choices. But it doesn't mean that the majority of women wouldn't be interested to kind of accelerate. And so as a company, and I'm very committed to support QuEST exactly on that journey, we should do whatever it takes to help women who want to accelerate, who have the potential to accelerate, that they can accelerate.
Thank you, Claudia. Since we talked quite a bit about your family as well, some of the questions I'm getting from the audience is on that front. I hope you don't mind answering maybe one more that people are wondering about. And you just now talked about the influence of women on their own family, right? If each, and mothers have huge influence on each of their families, and if you could turn a switch on and every mother on this planet were to kind of talk about diversity and raise their own family in a very good environment promoting diversity, the whole world could change in one generation. But that's not going to happen because it's going to take time. But the point is, mothers have a huge influence. So now somebody is asking, hey, you are a lone child in your family. Now you have a daughter who's who has 4 brothers ahead of her. So in your family, how are you raising your daughter, and what are the dynamics, and what's the right way to raise a daughter so that the diversity is promoted?
Yeah, so I would, first of all, I would say even with the 4 boys, right? For me, it's very important, their how should I say, their image of women. And of course, they don't have any other reference point than me being a working mother, as well as my husband being a working father. But I think that, I'm always very sensitive to the word role modeling, because I don't believe in like the role model, but I'm sure that children who observe their parents, if that is a good partnership and that they see it is doable, at least they will start already in a different, at a different spot compared to children who haven't seen it. Now, again, I'm very honest, with my daughter. I mean, first of all, she's a lucky one because she has 4 older brothers, and her self-esteem compared to what I had as self-esteem at that age is just, yeah, mind-boggling. Okay, she is already now a bit more in this mindset of I can do it. Yeah, I didn't have that as a 7-year-old. Now, so we don't know if that will stay, right? And so therefore, I can declare that a pretty holistic education for me has always been key. But I guess with her, I cannot avoid to say that, or I cannot, you know, talk around, but I look at her education and I want her to have a good STEM education, for instance, you know. I don't want her to just do a piano and painting. I want her to do experiments, and you know, we use the kitchen for all kind of experiments at, you know, whatever you can do at year 7, to just have fun and to just be exposed to science, because I strongly believe that you know, maybe she would initially be more leaning towards something with dolls, but now she loves experiments. Other than that, I think I don't treat her so much different than the boys, because it's all about the right values. And to just pull those through, I think, is work as parents. And I guess, you know, nobody is born as the perfect parent, but, you know, honesty, caring for others, you know, having clear goals and going for it, and not just kind of switching from one to the next target without really delivering. I think there are some real family values that we have, and you know, we educate them towards, you know, there's no problem that you fail and that you don't achieve your targets, but at least we want to see that you tried, and that there are no lame excuses for why something has not happened. And has not happened can be a stupid thing like, I promised my neighbor to do some shopping for her and I didn't do it. Then, okay, then I really want to understand why that didn't happen. Okay, so there must be a very good argument why you don't kind of deliver against your neighborhood and commitment, right, that you gave. And I rather have those discussions with all 5 of them. You know, the older ones, I don't need to have those discussions anymore, but the younger ones. And you know, it is more about, I want her to be a strong personality, but in terms of the values, it's no difference whatsoever. She doesn't get any better treatment. She doesn't get support. You know, in fact, I think she gets a lot of coaching and push from her brothers. But the one area where you know, education for me is important, holistic education, and more push towards STEM is also important for me.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So, you know, we have had a fabulous 50-minute of discussion already, Claudia. So time is going by fast. And thank you for you sharing all this insight. So now I want to try and wrap up. I'm getting a lot of messages from people thanking for this wonderful conversation we have had so far. So I want to try and wrap up with a few things. So, you know, you just now talked about how an ideal mother to raise a daughter, right? So we just talked about how to raise a daughter. What is your, you know, maybe short messages, if you were to give on this International Women's Day for a aspiring young woman at work? What is that 1 or 2 key messages you would want to leave for them to build their career?
I guess it starts with some confidence in yourself that you can do it. And it is very much linked to, you also need to really invest in yourself in terms of education. And education for me is not just academics, but also the broader value set. Because I think the most intelligent person, if they are not good in, you know, picking up the right signals, let's call it active listening. If they are not good in understanding why the other person is not convinced, you know, if they don't have the humility and humbleness, then investing everything into academics is really not worth it. So I would say I'm very convinced that every woman has a lot of strength and a lot of, you know, seeds in herself, but you need to invest and really kind of nourish those. which could be hard work, yeah, which most likely will be hard work. At least in my case, it was hard work and remains to be hard work. And to never ever go for complacency. That would be, I guess, the end of it. Which, you know,
Okay.
I could give messages to male, but hence it is Women's Day. I encourage them.
Okay. So what would be a short, powerful message for the manager, supervisor, the boss of an aspiring young woman who wants to build her career?
Support, honest feedback, and being supportive even if some things don't work out.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then you already talked about what a company should do. Again, like if you were to put it in few words, for an organization that is going into this 21st century, what is your important key message with respect to bringing diversity?
So first of all, I assume they have understood, you know, the reason why they should really care about it. Let's assume they got that. Yeah. Then I would say have a very clear target that you can measure. Because I think without, sadly, we don't really move as human beings. And be conscious about the steps you take towards that goal.
Yeah. Okay. I think so. The target is an important message. Without measuring, you won't really make progress, or you won't know where you are heading. So that's great. Thank you. So now, last final, you know, every year for the Women's Day, there is a cry, a war cry, whatever you call it. So this time it is choose to challenge. Okay. So different people are going around and saying they choose to challenge something. From your perspective, what is that one thing that you believe we should all choose to challenge to bring diversity in the world?
Yeah, this one, I really start with the mindset, right? If we could just not make a difference in our minds between women and men, and why, and this whole question of why she would not be able to do what he is doing, that would be a key challenge. If that is gone, then we are done. Yeah, then we are done, because then we are a tree and we can shape.
Absolutely.
But the reality is we have these mindsets and there are biases. So for me, I think honestly, it is a continuous support of other women so that more women can visibly, you know, achieve this parity dynamic, and by demonstrating it, so that it is not an abstract conversation, but by nurturing more women and supporting them to be successful.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's great. That's pretty much all the time we have. And during this conversation, I also covered several questions that came from the audience. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, sharing your thoughts, Claudia. I think it's been a fabulous 1 hour that I spent with you. I think there is lots to be learned for all the different stakeholders that have inherited, let's say, this one issue we. There is ways to go for us to and there is a lot of value in doing that, like you said. So each one really needs to understand what is our role in creating this change. So obviously, over the last 100 years or so, much has been achieved, but there is so much more to be done. And we should all commit ourselves to choose some of the things that we want to challenge. And I think your one word was perfect. Each one have a mindset. If we just set right our mindset on this topic, there would be a sea change in how we would benefit as a society and this world. So thank you really very, very much for sparing your afternoon in Hong Kong. And I hope that you can have a wonderful day today. And we are all celebrating International Women's Day because there is lots to be celebrated. So let's go off and celebrate as well as we continue to commit ourselves to make more change. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ajay. You all have a very good day.
Bye.
Bye.